Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Next comment or question comes from XP50 Player in response to Korg Nautilus. People keep special editions Korg Kronos VST. Mailbag I did in November 2024. And XP50 writes, a Kronos VST couldn't be any less feasible now than the available VST versions of the Montage, which apparently runs fine on M-Silicon processors. The main issue I see with it is the load time for large sample libraries, unique to the Korg Kronos and Montage. They ought to have an option to preload everything for live players, expecting faster sound switching, or load as you go for home studio use, with the 3-minute plus initial load time being cut. Now, actually, do you know what? That is a damn good idea and a very good point raised. Giving the users the option to load up front or as required based on the operating requirements would be a really, really good option. Really be a great option for your Kronos, because with your Kronos you select the libraries you want to load, or you don't select your libraries you want to load, and then you have to go and load them anyway. In operation, of course, they would have to be in memory on the keyboard, otherwise you cannot transition the sounds in real time. So there is a logic behind this preload exercise. And it doesn't actually, funny enough, the silly thing is, we talk about preload, it doesn't actually preload them per se. What it actually does is it opens the file and creates the reference in the software, so you don't actually have to go and open the file. That's what it's doing. It doesn't load them into memory per se, because it is caching the memory to disk. I hope that makes sense. I do wonder whether the 32-bit nature might also be a blockage for the newer Macs at this point, because obviously, as we all know, the newer Macs are all 64-bit operation, or exclusively 64-bit operation now, and it has no more support for a 32-bit driver and 32-bit operation. So of course you can't just port the Linux software off the Kronos onto a Mac, because it just won't work. You have to recompile it as a 64-bit operating system, and then that really sort of kind of leads you to say, well, why didn't they just recompile it as a 64-bit operating system for the Kronos anyway? Because, well, I'm pretty sure there are some limitations in the Kronos in terms of other bits of the component circuitry that won't support 64-bit operation. But I have to say that the whole 32-bit, 64-bit is a bit of a pain in the rump, and a lot of musicians over the last couple of years have been sort of whinging on this channel as well, whinging like hell about the fact that they've done an upgrade to the latest version of Apple OS, and all of a sudden half their studio doesn't work. Well, this is the reason why I have various machines, or various computers, should I say, in the studio environment. Most of them are not here, actually, funny enough. Most of them I do actually keep in storage because I only need them for specific things. And therefore, rather than clutter up this space, I just go and get them as I need them. It is a bit of a pain, I have to be honest, because I have to remember that I need them to go and get them, if that makes any sense. But it's the reason why I have 2 Macs at the moment, one running one operating system, one running another operating system, and neither of them running the latest operating system. And I also have various flavours of Windows floating around, from Windows XP, Windows 98, well, I've got Windows XP, Windows 98, Windows 7, Windows 10. You know, but this is reality. This is reality of where we live. You know, if you want to run this stuff, you need old technology. If you want to run the most banging up-to-date plugin, you probably want M1 silicon. No, that's wrong. You probably want Mac silicon, because it's now M3, isn't it? Second time lucky on this one. This one's from Rennie Zeggers, I think it is, in response to how to set up your Roland TR-8. And he writes that, can anyone help him out? He's using a Maschine MK3 connected to a Roland TR-8 via MIDI. He doesn't say whether that's USB MIDI or 5-pin DIN. But what he's saying is that his Maschine MK3 is running at 133 BPM, but his Roland TR-8 is running at almost a double or more RPM. When the MIDI is disconnected, the Roland was set at 266 beats per minute or even higher. Now I'm going to publish this to the community and say, anybody out there know what's going on with this one? Because I don't have a Maschine MK3, I don't have any Maschine instruments at all, so I can't test this. So somebody who might have this set up, maybe they can say what's going on. Also, I don't know whether you're trying to run this as USB MIDI or whether you're trying to run it 5-pin DIN MIDI, because the first thing I would do is I would disable the USB and run it 5-pin DIN to see if it was something with your USB MIDI configuration. And USB MIDI configuration is far more difficult than 5-pin DIN MIDI configuration. You know, sometimes simple is best. Anyway, on the other thing I would say, and this is kind of a top tip, is the TR-8 set to consume an external clock? And you do that as part of the setup, and there is a video on the channel that shows you how to do that, if I remember correctly. If I remember when I'm editing this video and setting it up for publishing, I will push that, or push the post the link to the video in the description. The reason, so that's the first thing, and here's the other. This is the one that gets a lot of people, right? So if you've got a setup, for argument's sake, where you have a switch on the wall and you switch the wall and the whole setup comes live, that could be your problem. Okay? Or you switch things on in the wrong sequence, that could also be your problem. So here's why. In order for the Roland TR-8 to operate with an external clock source, it listens when you switch it on. So you must have the external clock source switched on, number one, and transmitting timecode, okay, on the MIDI. And that means all the instruments between your timecode and the instrument that you're trying to debug, in this case the Roland TR-8. And you have to switch them on in sequence. Okay, so if you have two instruments between your timecode and your TR-8, you must switch the timecode on first, then instrument 1, instrument 2, and then your TR-8. Okay, so you must switch them on and make sure they're booted before you switch the TR-8 on. Because if you don't do that, what happens is the TR-8 boots up, says, I'm listening for an external time clock. Oh, there's no external time clock, so I'm going to default to the internal time clock. Okay, that has hit me several times. It's one of the reasons why I don't have all this stuff switched to power on when I power up the racks. You know, I switch what I need on when I need it, but remember to switch the time code on. It's also got me when I've been recording as well, because the devices that synchronize the timecode between the cameras and the sound recorder and anything else I'm using at the time, computers, etc., etc., the timecode has to be switched to generate first before the other things can consume the right timecode. Anyway, I hope that helps. It's not, these sort of MIDI things are not the easiest to set up, but I would always say, if you're having trouble with USB MIDI, go back to 5-pin DIN MIDI. If it works at 5-pin DIN MIDI, then you've got your USB system set up wrong. If it doesn't work on 5-pin DIN MIDI, then you're probably looking at settings on general MIDI settings between Maschine A and Maschine B.